2011, Dunmore, Pennsylvania. We often wonder about what happens after death. Many things remain unknown. Is there somewhere that the deceased go? And is there some way for them to still communicate with the living? That is possibly a question that has crossed the minds of the family of Jack Froese in 2011. Jack was described as having a larger-than-life personality before he unexpectedly passed away, but what remains a mystery to this day is not Jack's death, but rather a series of emails that were received by his loved ones from his email over 5 months after he passed away. What is the explanation for these emails? Is there any way that this was in fact Jack communicating with his loved ones from beyond the grave? How was this possible? And how did Jack know personal information about his family after he passed away? Today on Unblurring the Unknown, we look into a meshing of both the paranormal and a puzzling mystery. Can we solve the mystery of the Jack Froese emails? Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. As always, I am your host, Dominic, and today's episode was kind of chosen, and today's episode's topic was found as I was scrounging around the internet, like I usually do, for topic ideas, and I came upon this one, and it stuck out to me. Now, this is a topic that I haven't done before. I haven't done any prior research into, and this kind of idea of the afterlife and reincarnation is something / a topic that I've meant to do for a while now, but I've kind of sidelined it for the time being, just with other episodes and other topics that I've kind of come up with. And I'm like, well, I want to do this one over this one, and I've talked about covering something along the lines of the afterlife for a while within my social circles. But now I'm going to finally take the time to do an episode kind of about that for this week. Now, when I found this topic, I thought this was kind of the best of both worlds, so to speak, between kind of the paranormal, but also kind of a little bit of like an internet mystery too, as this has to do with mysterious emails and things like that. So how today's episode is going to go is that I am first going to get into Jack Froese's emails and the story behind them. Then after that, I am going to go into another case of an object being used to attempt to communicate with the dead, this time through obviously a different form of media, not emails. And at the very end, I will kind of wrap everything up and I will cast my theories, thoughts, and opinions on the matter. However, I will just say this before we dive right into the mystery today. With this, it seems very concise and rather short. The story of the emails themselves, there's not really much here to go on. It's a lot of kind of theories and people on the internet kind of speculating what they think it could be. And it's kind of rather short. And because of that, I will try and provide as much information as I can about the emails, but this might be a shorter episode than what you might be used to, and of course, I apologize about that in advance. So our story starts with Jack Froese, a seemingly rather ordinary man who was described by friends and family as a very kind person, who was a master of sarcasm and had a quick wit. Now, Jack loved music, he had a passion for tattoos, and of course, loved his 2 children. Now, unfortunately, Jack would pass away suddenly at the age of 32 due to a heart arrhythmia. Now, obviously, this was a shock to his family and friends, and normally this would be a time where people would, of course, try and find a way to cope as best as you can, and just everything that kind of goes along with that when there's a death of a loved one. But what would happen a few months later has left people scratching their heads, even now, almost 13 years after the fact. Now, about 5 months later, in November of 2011, is when this mystery would take a very odd and mysterious turn. One of Jack's closest friends, Tim Hart, would receive an email. But not just any email. An email from Jack, which, on the surface, doesn't make any sense. Jack was dead. How was his account sending him emails 5 months after his passing? Now, when he looked at this email, it said the following. It came from Jack Froese's email account, because it clearly said that it came from his account, and in the subject line, there was a text reading, "I'm watching." The email then read, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your fucking attic." Now, this statement might seem bizarre and totally out of the ordinary, but for Tim Hart, it kind of wasn't. In an email he did with the BBC in 2012, Tim would explain the meaning behind this email. Now, it turns out one of the last time Froese went over to Tim Hart's house, they had gone up to his attic and had made remarks about possibly finishing it. Tim was quoted in this article with saying, "We were looking at what we would have to do if we ever wanted to finish it. And the floor is just dusty, and he's like, better clean this attic before I get up there." There was no one else in the attic with them at the time. Just he and I up there. That's it. Now, this kind of clears up kind of the meaning behind that email, and this would imply that whoever sent this email from Jack's account knew about the attic, and on the surface that wouldn't make sense because Jack and Tim were the only ones in the attic. Is it possible that Jack was using his email as a way to communicate with his friends from beyond the grave? It might seem insanely far-fetched, but is it really? Now, this would be the only email that Tim would receive from Jack's email account, and of course it left him with more questions than answers. However, it wouldn't be the only email sent from Jack's account after his passing. Now, Jack's cousin, Jimmy McGraw, would also receive an email from Jack later on November 21st of that same year. Now, this email Jimmy wouldn't find till about 10:30 p.m. that night, implying that the email came in earlier in the day, and this one was different than the one that Tim had received earlier in the month. This email had the subject heading read, "Hey Jim," and then read the following. "How you doing? I knew you were going to break your ankle. Tried to warn you. Gotta be careful. Tell Rock for me. Great song, huh? You're welcome. Couldn't get through to him. His email didn't work." Close quote. Now, you might be wondering who Rock is and kind of why he's important to the story, and I'm going to kind of make a joke here. Just to clarify, the person he's referring to as Rock is not The Rock, as in Dwayne Johnson, but actually another one of Jack's cousins, Frank Froese. Now, Frank has another interesting tidbit to add to this story, and I'm going to say it, and then we'll kind of finish up with the email that Jimmy received. Now, it turns out that Frank started leaving YouTube comments when the BBC actually first picked up on this story, and from what I could find, they did the most digging into this actual story, which kind of seems weird because you would think that, I mean, they're in Pennsylvania, maybe a local paper would pick it up, but it seems like BBC did most of the heavy lifting here, and then kind of other agencies just kind of like picked up the story and was like, oh, look, emails from beyond the grave, whatever. BBC did the heavy lifting, and other news agencies seemingly just picked it up and like did like a one paragraph report on it. It's just, I don't know, seems weird. Maybe they just didn't believe it, or maybe they were skeptics. Maybe they just didn't want to do the time researching it. I don't know. Seems very weird for the lack of coverage that it did receive. But that is, of course, just my personal opinion. So when the BBC did start covering this, Frank commented under one of the videos the BBC posted in regards to the story, and he said the following. "I'm Jack's cousin Frank. My family calls me Rock. In the video, you will notice on Jimmy's phone it says, 'Tell Rock good song. You're welcome.' Tried to contact him, and his email didn't work. That's a reference to a song I wrote for him months after he died. I was having trouble finishing the song, and Jack came to me in a dream. We sat down with guitars and a bottle of whiskey and finished the song. The next day, I woke up and played what we played in the dream." End quote. Now, there's a little bit more to this comment, but that's kind of like the really important stuff I wanted to share, and it gives us some more clues. Now, the email did mention something about Jimmy suffering an ankle injury as well, and maybe you might be thinking that somehow this is a prank, and somehow someone close to Jimmy got Jack's email and has some sort of true sick sense of humor. Don't really know why somebody would do that, but I have heard of crazier things. However, that's kind of where you would be wrong. It turns out that the week prior to this email is when Jimmy broke his ankle, and he had told very few people about it up to this point, which implies that the email knew about his ankle, when the majority of everyone in Jimmy's life didn't. But from Frank, we also get another piece of this puzzle, And that being Frank said about Jack showing up in his dreams and helping him finish the song he was writing for him. Now, it would be reasonable to assume that if Frank was writing a song about his cousin who had passed, he would be not super open about the idea that he was writing it, or at least I wouldn't be. Now, the claim that Jack appeared in his dreams to help him finish it, and then saying the same thing in an email to Jimmy about Rock's song that he had wrote for him. Oh, say, hey, tell Rock it's a good song. Frank saying, oh, he appeared in my dreams. We wrote the song together. That kind of corroborates with each other, and it seems very, very compelling. Now, of course, you might be saying it could be someone within the family that is maybe making these emails that's kind of really close to everybody, and I'm not going to fully rule that out at this point, but I will go into it a little bit further in our theories section as well. But this does add a point involving maybe, in fact, this is Jack communicating from beyond the grave. After all, now we have Frank saying that he has appeared in a dream he's had, and it's not the first time in my personal research that I have heard in a ghost story that, like, okay, somebody has seen a loved one or the ghost of somebody in a dream. I have heard of that before, but in terms of our story, where does that leave us? Now, the internet is kind of split on what they think happened here, and really so is Jack's family, for that matter. However, Jack's mother, Patty, views the emails as a gift from Jack, and whether or not he actually sent them isn't relevant. And other members of the Froese family feel similarly. Tim told the BBC it helped him feel closer to his lost friend after he received the email, and this is Patty's direct quote from the BBC article. She said, "I thought they were fantastic. They were great." Patty would then go on later to tell Tim, "Think what you want about it, or just accept it as a gift," close quote. Now, kind of about that, again, that's going to those two statements, I think, are going to loop back into theories, because Jack's mother does come back up into this story. You might think that those statements are a little bit kind of odd. You might be alerting to the fact that maybe she got access to his email, sent the messages as a way of some sort of coping mechanism, and then tried to be like, oh no, it wasn't me, I just looked at them as a gift. But I'll go into that in theories. But it's kind of an interesting thing to think about right now before we kind of get into that later part of the episode. Now, kind of before we do get into theories about what could be going on here, I think it's important as well to go over a couple interesting things that I found in doing my research. Now, it is no secret that when a loved one passes away, it is a very difficult experience to go through. And I think everybody can relate to that to some degree. And I actually wanted to look into how many people experience something kind of unexplainable, or perhaps some type of communication, or what they consider to be communication, from a loved one after death. And when I looked into it, the numbers were a lot higher than I thought. Through a study done by the University of North Texas, they came to the conclusion that about 1/3 of all people experience some type of communication from a loved one after death. Some experts debate what could be considered a form of communication, but what people often associate with kind of these subliminal messages from loved ones from beyond the grave, these kind of include seeing them in your dreams, seeing their favorite number or birthday repeatedly throughout daily life, smelling scents randomly that you might associate with that person, and kind of maybe having a stranger say a phrase to you that that family member might have said frequently. Now, if you are a skeptic in the paranormal, or perhaps the afterlife, you might be thinking that all of those things could merely be a coincidence, and you might be right. However, that doesn't stop people from trying to reconnect with their loved ones from beyond the grave. Take the interesting case of the Atsushi phone booth in Japan, for example. Now, if you might be unfamiliar with this phone booth, it is located in Atsushi Iwate Prefecture, Japan, and if I said any of those words incorrectly, I do apologize. I try my best with pronunciations. I'm not the greatest all the time. Now, this phone is actually unconnected, so when you pick up the phone, no one is actually on the other side of it. However, designer Itaru Sasaki had the idea to construct the phone booth in his garden out of remembrance for his cousin who passed away in 2010. Now, Sasaki has always said that through talking through this phone in the phone booth, he's been able to feel like he is still connected to his cousin. And because of that, many people take the trip every year to the Atsushi phone booth to pick up the phone and hope that they can talk to the loved ones they have lost. Now, this phone reached widespread public knowledge and publicity after the Japan earthquake of 2011, when Sasaki actually opened up his garden to the public so that those who had lost family members in the earthquake could still use the phone as a way to try and connect with those that they had lost. Now, depending on what you believe, you might think that this is all malarkey. But for those who are looking for closure and are grieving, items such as the Atsushi phone booth has helped kind of create an outlet for those struggling to cope with their own personal losses. Now, even though this might be the tale of two sides of the coin and that the emails in the phone booth are kind of unrelated, it does show that a lot of people go to extreme lengths to try and contact their loved ones from beyond the grave. Now, of course, like I said, completely unrelated instances, but the emails pose us a very interesting question, whether or not that this is Jack from beyond the grave. And to my knowledge and what I could find, it didn't seem like the family of Jack's tried any other means of trying to get in touch with him. You know, for example, maybe like a seance or something like that. I know a lot of people try and get in touch with their loved ones through a seance, through a Ouija board or something like that. I couldn't find anything that says that they tried to get in touch with him. They just kind of looked at the emails and like, okay, this is like a blessing, this is like a gift, but I couldn't find that they did anything else. And if Jack was somehow able to use his email from beyond the grave, that would be absolutely extraordinary. But we have no evidence to prove that. And in my personal opinion, before we move on to theories here, if I had happened to got an email from my loved one in regards to, you know, something personal or something like that, I would try and go the lengths to try and contact them and try and reach out to them, whether that be through a Ouija board. And it's like, I am totally not going to use a Ouija board, like, ever. But if I had something like that happen to me that's paranormal, that's unexplainable, I would use a Ouija board, or I would find some way to try and get in touch with them, because that seems kind of like they're trying to get in touch with me. Again, that is my own personal opinions on the matter, but the fact that I couldn't find that they did anything else in regards to this is kind of weird. Again, I guess they were just kind of like, it's a gift, and just kind of like let it be. Again, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but again, there's not really a whole lot of information about this story. There's really just kind of all these kind of laundry list of theories about what could possibly be at play here, and I'm going to get into that right now. Now, let's start with the first theory here, and I kind of briefly alluded to it earlier in the episode, and that this theory is Jack's mother. Now, this would mean that Jack's mother is somehow behind the emails. Now, this would involve her knowing the password to her son's email account and then sending the messages to Tim and Jimmy, and this would explain possibly how she knew about Jimmy breaking his ankle, and maybe even Jack told her about Tim's attic before he passed away, so you kind of have an explanation for both of those things. However, Patty Froese has claimed she doesn't know her son's password to his email account. However, she was the one who was kind of very open about the emails being a good thing, so kind of who knows about this theory. I mean, it is possible to get into somebody else's email account and kind of like change the password and stuff like that, but you have to jump through so many hoops to do that, and I don't know if Jack's mother would want to go through all these hoops to do it, especially if she was doing it just in kind of like a remembrance, kind of like, oh, look, Jack's emailing you guys from beyond the grave, let's just take it as a gift, and maybe she was using it as some type of coping mechanism. Who knows? This is all just me speculating. This is me kind of just like brainstorming and just throwing all these ideas out there. But I'm not really sure if I'm totally convinced by this theory. Now, our second theory is something known as the dead man's switch. Now, if you don't know what the dead man's switch is, it is actually a message that can be sent from multiple different websites. It can be messages sent to your loved ones from beyond the grave. You just set up kind of like a account through one of these Dead Man Switches websites, and you can set predetermined messages to be sent out from your social media accounts or email after a undisclosed period of time of kind of not logging into them, and then this system then takes it as you have passed away, and then this Dead Man Switch website will send these said messages out to the desired recipients. However, this theory does not count for one giant hole, and that being Jimmy's broken ankle. Jimmy broke his ankle only a couple days before he got the email from Jack's account, so this wouldn't make any sense. if Jack had set up a Dead Man's Switch account, you would seemingly think that maybe he wouldn't know about Jack's broken ankle. Maybe the addict, you could explain, like, okay, maybe that would make sense that he would set up a message to be like, oh, I'm a jokester. They said, his family said, he was sarcastic, he had a big personality. Maybe that's kind of like a joke you could pull from beyond the grave. However, on the flip side of that, Jack also died from heart arrhythmia, which was very sudden. So the idea that maybe he knew that this was going to happen and he kind of set it ahead in advance just doesn't really make any sense. And it would also be impossible for Jack to anticipate that Jimmy was going to break his ankle 5 months earlier when he passed away. That's just, it's impossible. That is virtually impossible. And you might think that maybe if you like this theory, that the email sent to Tim could be responsible from a Dead Man's Switch, because the attic is just the attic, and maybe Jack could have made the message as kind of like, again, as I mentioned, a troll from beyond the grave. But that would be only one email from the Dead Man's Switch, and kind of like if it was one email from the Dead Man's Switch to Tim and not Jimmy, and the one from Jimmy was weird and didn't make any sense, that doesn't make any sense. So in my opinion, the emails are together. The Dead Man's Switch wouldn't just account for one, and that just, you kind of go down that rabbit hole, and that just doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. Now, our third theory is this is spam. This is another worthy contender of a theory that a lot of people have posed online. Could this be some type of spam bot or hacker that got access to Jack's account after he passed? This would kind of make sense. We live in a very technologically advanced age where spam bots and hackers and all these things are very prevalent in our day-to-day lives. Now, this could be possible. We could look at an instance into a journalist named David Carr, who after he passed away in 2015, had his Twitter account hacked by a spam bot, and then this spam bot sent out a plethora of kind of inappropriate tweets and things like that on his social media accounts. That shocked his family, because David was dead. He should have not been sending things from his account, but obviously he was sending all these kind of inappropriate messages out on the internet, and kind of his family and coworkers were like, oh my god, before they realized that this was the work of a spam account, and that his account got hacked after he had passed away. However, I don't know if I fully buy this theory. The emails were too personal, and they knew about Tim's attic, they knew about Jimmy's ankle, and even the song that Frank was writing for his cousin. A spammer would not know all of this personal information. They would not know whether or not Tim had an attic. A spammer wouldn't know that Jimmy broke his ankle. They wouldn't know that Frank was writing a song for his cousin. A spammer just would not know that. And to me, this theory just kind of goes completely out the window, because it just wouldn't make sense. Now, this last theory is what I titled A Message from Beyond the Grave, and this is just the unexplainable one. This is, in my opinion, the theory that says this is Jack trying to communicate from beyond the grave and using the energy that his spirit has to communicate this. Now, as a personal believer in the paranormal and someone who has done some research into the paranormal, kind of ghosts, spirits, they have energy. And a lot of that energy is sometimes used to make noises, move objects, or even appear and be seen just in the naked eye. Now, maybe Jack was using this energy he had as a spirit that he did have to communicate in a way that perhaps hasn't been documented before by paranormal investigators. This might be perhaps a stretch, but when you're looking at this case and you start to go down the list of possible theories and you kind of check each one off and you're like, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it, and you just run out of ideas, you fall back to the theory that it's just truly unexplainable. And this is the conclusion that I feel like I've arrived at. It seems like due to the personal nature of these emails, it wouldn't be unrealistic to say that this is Jack. It wouldn't make sense that anyone would have access to his account. And if, again, like I mentioned before, if someone went through all the hoops to recover Jack's old account to pull off some kind of prank, because that's kind of the only way I would look at this, maybe like if another friend tried to do this, that's kind of messed up. Even if I know people who have very sick senses of humor, but I don't think they would ever hack into somebody's email and say very personal messages and make you think like, oh, well, he's dead. Like, that just would not make any sense. Again, I feel like we all know that person within our lives that has that very twisted, sick sense of humor that's probably not okay anymore. But I just don't see that being a possibility here. I feel like the second you start to play with the idea of whether somebody's dead or whether somebody's alive, it's just not okay. And I don't think a prank either would be a very good idea of honoring someone who has passed away, especially a family member or even a close friend. Even if they would think that it's funny if they were still alive, that is just not the right way to remember somebody. However, I think these messages were actually from Jack. And whether or not we will figure out how his spirit was able to send these messages might remain a total mystery. And no matter what side you decide to fall on in terms of theories here, this is one that I truly chalk up to we might never know the answer to this. We might never have an answer to whether or not this was Jack who sent the emails. And if this happened to be a family member, I don't think that they will ever confess to actually doing it. I don't think they ever imagined if somebody had pulled this off as some sort of hoax. I don't think they'd ever confess to the news media that, hey, I did this hoax, because it did get some internet traction and it did hit the news for a brief period of time. So I didn't think that if this was a prank that they expected it to hit the news like it did and be such kind of like a widespread story among kind of these mystery internet kind of forums along the internet. However, that is kind of my theory, of course. Please let me know what you think your personal theory is on this, whether you think that maybe it was a family member, maybe you think it was Jack's mother, probably trying to cope with her losses, maybe you think that this was a spammer in some way, maybe you think that this is somebody who got access to their personal information and then decided to take it a step further and joke about a family member who was dead. Again, let me know in the comments what you think about your personal theory on this. I'd love to hear it. And if I happen to miss any information in doing my research, please leave that down in the comments as well. I am definitely not perfect when it comes to research, and I try and get as much information as I possibly can for these episodes. But with that being said, since it is the end of the episode, I of course do my mandatory kind of plugs at the end. And if you were listening to this on Spotify, please turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode. And if you happen to be listening to this on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe to my content. It helps me out with the algorithm gods. I greatly appreciate it. Now, along with this, you can also follow me on Instagram. That is Unblurring the Unknown on Instagram. I'll be posting the custom cover art to this episode and any photos that I find relevant along my journey into this week's topic. In addition, for those of you who do not know, I believe I made an announcement on a couple episodes prior, but I know I forgot it on the most recent Slippery Skin episode. I am officially on TikTok, and that is also Unblurring the Unknown on TikTok. I'll be posting kind of 1-minute breakdowns to each episodes, so kind of just trying to broaden my reach, kind of broaden my scope, get my content out to more people, and to just kind of other like-minded people who kind of appreciate this kind of content. So feel free to follow me there as well. And if you happen to have any topic suggestions for me, I try to get to topic suggestions as quick as I possibly can. You can send those to me via Instagram direct message. You can also send those to my email account, that is unblurringtheunknown@gmail.com. You can send those to those two avenues, and I will throw it into my queue, and I will try and get to it as soon as I possibly can. But with that being said, that is going to conclude today's episode on the Jack Froese emails. I had a lot of fun researching this one. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all on the next one.